All right, well, we're going to get started, I guess. Hello, everybody who's listening in, and thanks for joining us. My name is Sean Renier, and this is going to be Lee's podcast, I guess, and I'm going to be your host. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in Lee, born and raised, lived here for pretty much my whole life. In about 5 years, this is my 6th year on the select board. 5 years ago, I got elected for my first term. Now I'm on my second, and I just was appointed chair of the board. So I really wanted to start this podcast to give people a better window into town government, meet the people who make the town run, and talk about current events and what's going on in Lee, give people a better perspective on town government. And this is the first podcast, so I thought it would be a great way to start with our town administrator who's joining me now. So Chris, thanks for being here with me and having a conversation. We'll just hop right into it, and my first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you became town administrator.
Well, thanks, Sean, and thanks for having me. So, like you, I also was born in Lee. I've lived my whole life here, went to Lee school system. I worked in education for about 20 years. During that time, I was involved in town government as the moderator for about 14 years. And then about a year and a half or so as town clerk, and then town administrator. And so I've been just over 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
In this position, yeah.
Great. What, in your opinion, I have some thoughts too, but what makes Lee unique?
Yeah, well, I hear a lot of people, have said to me they feel like Lee, as far as southern Berkshires go, it feels like a real town.
Mm-hmm.
We're in, a real culturally rich area. A lot of people that come here for tourism to the Berkshires, and I think Lee definitely has a part of that. But what I think makes us unique from, say, Stockbridge or Lenox is I think we've kept a good, a stronger industry here than some of our neighboring towns. So we still share in some of that tourism. We have some cultural things here. We have the outlets, which is still, I believe, the number one the number one visited place in the Berkshires, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But we also have, I'm going to call it Lee Lime, but
formerly known as
formerly
Lee
Lee Lime,
we have
which
quarries,
is So we still have some marble out of there, and we do have the limestone, which is Old Castle now. Mm-hmm. We have some biotech industries that are here in Lee as well. And a number of tradespeople that I think more in Lee than some of the towns around us. So we have a good mix, I think, of nice shops and restaurants. We have some tourism, but we also have, again, sort of that real town feel of, it's not not all tourism here.
Yeah.
It's not our primary. It's kind of a good diversity of things. So
yeah, I totally agree with you. I think in a lot of that same vein, for me, it's the sense of community. We have some characters in town, some great people, and I think that like really helps to showcase what you kind of said about Lee feels like a real town more than maybe some of the other towns that there's a sense of community here when we have like the Founders Day and that sort of thing. It's just always the same people coming out, and that kind of goes into the to say blue collar kind of feel. Like we do have a good sized contractor population of working class people in this town that kind of makes us makes Lee what Lee is, and I think that shows, and I think that's a great thing for our town. And
I was going to say too, like when something that you don't see everywhere too, when there's a resident with an issue or
Right.
some kind of catastrophic event, you see everyone pull together and support them. You know, that we may disagree on certain things, but there's definitely that sense of community, and people, you know, will be there to support each other when there's when there's a need.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, nobody's ever left out or forgotten about, that's for sure. Well, I guess talking more about the Lee government, you know, we just had our annual town meeting, and I don't want to go into specifics of what we did in the town meeting. You know, it's up on CTSB if anybody wants to go back and look at it, or the warrant's still up on the website, I'm sure, and people can go out and find it. But I wanted you to kind of give everybody an idea of how we form the warrant. You know, what goes into it. The annual town meeting, and we have special town meetings that we do other things too, but the annual town meeting for me is a big part of that is setting the budget, getting approval for appropriating money so that we can fund government, and you know, there's other things like that. But why don't you go ahead and give everybody kind of a bigger window into how that gets created.
Yeah, so Lee operates on a traditional open town meeting format, which a lot of small towns in Massachusetts and in other New England towns use. We have seen some areas even in New England that have gone to either cities or town councils or a representative town meeting like we used to have. But as you go anywhere outside of New England, it's kind of a foreign concept. You tend with more town councils where you're you can appropriate money on a monthly or bi-monthly basis through a council. So when you talk to people from other states, they find it very strange when we say that, you know, when I tell them we have to set our entire budget for the year in one session. And if we don't, you know, that's a special meeting and it's a lot of things to go. So we were pretty much planning a whole year in getting it all done in one shot. So there's a lot behind that. And so the process, believe it or not, starts in mid to late October, when you know, I'll go out to different departments and start asking them, okay, what do you need for your budget for the next fiscal year, which won't start for, you know, 6 or 7 months after, actually more than that, probably like 8 or 9 months after that. But that in the fall, we'll say, what kind of capital items do you need? What operating things do you need? And from October to December, we kind of get that all worked out internally, and then right after the holidays, Finance Committee will start meeting in January, February, and March and reviewing all those budgets until we get to around April when the warrant gets posted, and then the meeting in May, and that's going to set up our budget that will start July 1st. So even though, you know, we're going to get a couple months this summer without having to worry about too much about budgets, and then we'll be back at it again for next year. So it's always nice to get through town meeting. There's a nice little break there, and then as soon as the summer's over, we're getting ready for the next fiscal year. But the process, of course, is you know, a lot of people don't realize it, but when we, you know, people ask, can you afford something or not? Well, you know, we can afford anything as long as we raise taxes enough. So it's kind of a backwards approach in municipal finance, because we're going to set a budget, it's going to get approved or amended or whatever, and as soon as that budget is passed, we actually start spending that money in July 1st. What's weird about it is we haven't actually collected any taxes on it yet. So we take that whole money, say our budget's $25 million, we subtract out any income we're expecting to get, and that's where it gets even stranger. We're going to say, oh, we expect to get X number of dollars from cannabis taxes, and so much money from hotel and restaurant taxes, and so much money in birth certificates and building permits and things like that, and ambulance receipts.
Those are our major forms of revenue.
Right, yeah, and then so much in state aid and that sort of thing. And then whatever's left, we go back to the assessor and we look at the values of our house and we're able to set a tax rate on it. But we're already
Right.
spending that money and you know, and then collecting it. So it's kind of a weird approach for some people to grasp. But
Yeah, and along with that budget process, there's a lot of like, there's oversight in that. There's a finance committee, we have a capital outlay committee that kind of like brings, maybe you can talk a little bit about those committees and how they function.
yeah, so there's a lot of steps along the way where people can see what's happening. It's
Yeah.
all
This
you
is
know,
all open meetings.
It's all open
happens-
meetings. Yeah, I mean,
anyone's welcome to come.
when the internal part, again, October, November is when I'm meeting with department heads. That's that's not in a public meeting to get the requests. Once we have the request, the rest of the process after that is either it's going to go, some things are going to go through the Board of Public Works and they're going to get a recommendation and they're going to be able to talk about it in a public meeting where they can get public comments. So if we're talking about road paving, Board of Public Works is going to sit down and discuss with DPW what road should get paved and how much money we should get and if we need to buy a new truck or whatever. Capital outlay is going to look at other capital expenses, and then the finance committee is going to go line by line of the whole budget from start to finish over several weeks. And those meetings are all open. So typically we do a budget overview. We bring in department heads to kind of defend their budget, if you will. So when we get to the fire budget, the fire chief is there. They're going to ask him questions. Why did this go up? Why did that go up? Why do we need this much money? How
Yeah,
much
and
money are you bringing in? That sort
They
of
can
thing.
do that with any department head.
Correct,
Really.
yeah.
Most of them probably do come in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a one-person department and you have a level fund, they're not usually not going to talk to that department.
Yeah.
If there's a huge increase that is very explainable, like the clerk's budget, for example, it's always going to go up on a presidential election year
Yeah.
because we're going to have to run that election and we have to pay for part of it, and and that's a reasonable change that you see in Board of Registrars or clerk's budget. But other things, yeah, sometimes they'll come in, and we always have the large departments: police, fire, DPW. At the same time, school committees meeting.
Right.
They're going through theirs completely separate from us, but then after the school committee does theirs, the finance committee and the school committee will meet together to discuss their budget and make recommendations on that as well. So all of this happens before town meeting. When we get to town meeting, it's vetted through the select board, Board of Public Works, the school committee, the capital outlay committee, the finance committee, and they've all, again, all in public meetings. So that's really the time to get involved with the
Yeah.
budget. To try to do it at town meeting is not
A little-
impossible, but it's
it's-
difficult.
right.
Yeah.
You have to really know what you're targeting and what you're
Right.
what you're looking at if you want to make an emotion on the floor at town meeting. It's better to get in those open meetings and ask your questions there,
Right.
and then you can understand it a little bit more, I think. So there are other things that we typically do. We don't always do
Yeah.
these at annual town meeting, but there's other bylaws. I think there was one bylaw, regular, general bylaw, and then a couple zoning bylaws that came up this last meeting. Those, I think the planning board brought the zoning, and then it was just our select board that brought the bylaw, right?
Yeah,
General bylaw,
our
I
tax
think.
collector brought one of them this year, and it was more of a housekeeping
Yeah.
thing. A state law changed for how we collect past due taxes, and to keep the current system that we use and has worked well, we had to formally adopt it as a bylaw according to new state regulations. So, but we typically see zoning bylaws almost every annual meeting. There's at
Yeah.
least a couple of them. And those zoning bylaws go through a similar process. They can either be initiated by the select board to the planning board, or they can be initiated directly by the planning board. And the planning board then holds public hearings. And those go through a little more of a, on those meetings, rather than just being posted with the traditional 48 hours notice, zoning changes go to a newspaper posting, and they get posted 2 weeks ahead of time. So people can come to those, and then during the hearings, the board will make a recommendation, and they'll bring it to town meeting. So again, we're gonna vote it at a town meeting, but if you really actually wanna,
These are done in hearings, like
Yeah.
the planning board, when they're talking about bringing a zoning, they'll talk about it before, and then they'll have an actual hearing where they'll, you
right,
know,
yeah, and that's the time, honestly, if you wanna see a substantial change, if you don't like something in a bylaw, you can change it on the town meeting floor, and it's gonna take, it's gonna take a vote,
yeah,
and
it's
gonna
harder
be
to
tricky.
it's harder to change that with, potentially a couple hundred people there voting on it than it is to like go to a hearing of the planning board and
Right.
make your case there.
Yeah, I mean, the planning board, if you can convince them of your case, they might choose to, change it after the hearing and then and bring it to town meeting. And I've seen that happen before. Sometimes it's even like a clerical error that somebody finds and we fix it. But there was an example once where we posted the hearing and somebody noticed it and said, noticed a discrepancy there, and we brought it up at the hearing, and it got fixed, and we didn't have to make an amendment,
Right.
and it was a reasonable change, so it does happen.
And then one of the last kind of things at annual town meeting, it doesn't happen very often, but citizens can petition to put an article on the warrant to do whatever, right? I mean, essentially, not whatever, but anyone can petition to put a warrant article on the town warrant, right?
Yeah, if they collect enough signatures and do it in time, they can. The trick is, there's a few things, so.
Yeah.
What people need to realize is, just because you put a petition on, even if it passes, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Because there's legality to it
Right.
too. You can't just it's not just whatever. But
If somebody put a petition for a zoning bylaw, right off the bat, the Attorney General would never accept it because you can't initiate that at a town meeting. Legally has to be initiated through the planning board. But other things, like for example, if you put a motion, or sort of a petition rather, to buy whatever, say buy a truck for the town, or buy whatever, a new building or a vehicle or something, all you can do is authorize the select board to buy it. If the board decides they don't want to act on it, they don't have to. The other thing is, certain things may conflict with state law and be overturned.
it's best to, if you're thinking about initiating a citizen's petition, it's best to do your homework, ask us some questions, and try to do it in a way that is going to work.
Yeah, and to that point, if on our website there is in the town meeting section, there's a guide to initiative petitions, and it goes through the whole process on how to be successful, and whether you should be going to certain committees first, etc. And unfortunately, a lot of initiative petitions are not successful in the long run because people have not gone through the correct process, or proposed something to do that's not legal,
Right.
or it doesn't pass muster in one way or the other. So that guide is very helpful, and it goes through all the steps to have a successful initiative petition.
Great. Well, I think that's a lot of info on town meeting for those who maybe didn't quite know what
Yeah.
how things get created. Since you've been administrator about 3 years now, what are some of the ways the town has evolved? I think we've done quite a lot, but I'd like to kind of get your perspective. You've done a lot too, so.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, of course, is we're dealing with some infrastructure, some building issues, so.
Facilities,
Yeah,
right? That's one of the biggest things, which I think we'll get to more, in a minute here. Anything else in town hall, specifically?
Oh, yeah. So, at town hall things, we have reorganized some things a little bit here. We've added some new positions, changed some positions. You know, the biggest thing is we're trying to improve our land use and planning department. That's one thing we've been a little behind the eight ball on. People come and say, well, you know, I see this going on in Lenox, I see this going on in Great Barrington. They've had strong planning departments with a planner and a land use assistant and conservation agents and so forth.
Yeah.
And you know, and they have the manpower to get certain grants and things like that. So we've tried to expand that, and this past town meeting was kind of the next step in that by increasing that budget. So we'll have a full-time conservation agent / land use assistant and a full-time planner. And already there's 6 or 7 grants in progress that we normally wouldn't have the staffing to do. So, I mean, there's economic development things in the plans, cultural, and again, like I say, people would say, oh, well, they're doing this in Lenox, they're doing this in Great Barrington. They had the staff to do it. And if it works right, the amount of money you're paying those people should come back tenfold in projects and grants
and
coming to the town for free.
Yeah,
and that's our plan.
Yeah, I think I think it's smart to take some cues, not necessarily copy what other towns are doing, but you know, take some cues of what's working, right?
Right.
And go in that direction. This is also, some of that stuff was identified in the master plan that we updated, which I was a part of, and that's something that I think it's important for people to know, that that wasn't just like an exercise in, oh, we need to do it. So we really took a long time to figure out like what's the right directions to do and try to lay that plan out for the town in the future.
Yeah, and other master plans, we've done them before. Unfortunately, unless you have somebody to carry it out,
it just sits there.
It's just collecting dust. But you know, outside of that, we have we've been working to expand our in a new Parks and Rec department that we're creating, or committee that we're creating. Not a department, but a committee that we're putting together. But we have, over the last couple of years, started to invest more in our town forest. A lot of those had been neglected, and we started engaging greenagers to come and do work with that. The Greener Gateway Committee has gotten more involved. The Youth Commission has done a great job with our playgrounds and so forth, but we had some other
take their hard
fill.
work and build on it. I think that's kind of what how I see that committee working. What are some other priorities, you know, that you see?
Well, we've added CPA, and along with
that's
that,
Community Preservation Act, which we have a committee essentially, and each annual town meeting there is a warrant article, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so it's usually anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 worth of projects that have to be by law over and above our normal operating budget.
Yeah.
These are things we wouldn't normally do, but they're extra nice things that we can do, and they could be adding additional recreation, doing historical preservation, or the other one, which is kind of a new offshoot with housing, is that now that we have CPA, where we also voted to form an affordable housing trust. So CPA can is required to put at least 10% into affordable housing every year. They can do more than that, but it's a way for that CPA yearly money to go to affordable housing trust. The trust can then get money from other fees, from donations, etc., and then use that to be able to have a board that can put money towards housing projects in the town. So,
why don't you give us an update on that? You know, what you kind of mentioned earlier, the facilities issue that we were dealing with, specifically with our public safety, right?
Yeah, so we had several buildings that were in rough shape. Kind of starting at the north end of Main Street, you have the Central Fire Station, which is actually one of our oldest buildings and probably holding up better than almost all of the others. You know, it's a beautiful building. We're planning to preserve it and keep it. Next to that, however, was one of our newer buildings that was in terrible shape, which is the EMS building. And a sad story, it was built in the 90s, in my opinion, poorly designed, in a lot of people's opinion, poorly designed, and has not held up well. We have emergency supports holding the building together. So that was one issue. Again, next door you have the central fire station, which is in nice shape, but too small to house.
Too small. The
modern
doors,
equipment.
the doors
Yeah,
really
I mean,
were,
in the ceilings too.
and we'd have to specially order fire trucks to fit
Right.
there, right? It's just not the way you want to operate.
I mean, it was built for horses. There
Yeah.
were no trucks when it was made. So, and then you go down a little further south in downtown. You had the Araldi building, which was also in disrepair. Was housing a couple different departments. Most recently, Tri-Town Health. Next to that was an aging DPW garage right up against the river, not an ideal spot for a DPW. Also, again, in an older building that's pretty much outlived its expected life as a metal building. And then an old Quonset hut from the 1950s, which had a lot of asbestos in it. So.
I think last I was over there, it is still standing.
It is the only thing left.
It's the only thing over there still because of the
It's
asbestos.
because of the it was even more than we thought. So,
Jeez. And then the police in town hall is not ideal either. We have like the cells. I remember talking to Craig about how he kind of fails his state audit or his state inspection. Or
yeah.
Just because of the nature of how the layout is for his, that's mostly what to do with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this building was built in the late 1800s, and while it still serves us very well for offices and meetings, for a modern day police station, I mean, we're literally taking a prisoner from the park, where the cruiser can park, kind of parading them down Main Street in the main entrance of Town Hall, and then down into a basement to cells that were built in 1874 or whatever, and obviously they've had upgrades since then, but yeah, not an ideal situation. We have half the police department on one floor, half on another floor, kind of scattered throughout the building wherever we can fit them in, but.
So basically, in one kind of big push here, in one big kind of, one large building, we're going to house 3 or 4 departments, really, police, fire, EMS, and building.
Yep.
And then we moved DPW, we updated their facility by, buying an existing facility, and then that's going to also open up town hall space for our growing, we added some positions here, so I think we're doing a lot to, help improve town government, just this kind of one push, right?
Yeah, and kind of a side effect of that whole thing, but equally as important, is we had, I hate to use the word blighted, but it was a kind of a not so nice area of downtown that had the old Quonset hut, the Araldi building. It was not an attractive area of town. We're fixing that problem too. So, and I always told people that's a win-win-win because we're making the downtown nicer. We're getting a new state-of-the-art public safety facility, and we're offering more community spaces to the town at the same time. And one of those, which is kind of in its infant stages now, but since things are happening with the public safety building, demolition is 90% complete, minus one last little wrinkle with the Quonset hut. But we're going out for GC bids in a week or so. The central fire station has a committee looking at how we can reuse that, and the committee right now is kind of looking at that as a potential kind of community center. So we've engaged an architect, and we've got some floor plans and getting some ideas. So once the fire department is out of there, it'll be a historical preservation of that building and making it into new community space, and it should be a great facility for the community to use. So
great. No, I think it's all good. Just to kind of finish this off and wrap things up, what are some upcoming events for people you want to make them aware about, and how can they get involved,
Yeah, so we have a few things coming up. Memorial Day weekend, we'll be having our parade. There'll be Jeff Jam honoring the former police chief.
That raises some scholarship money,
Yeah,
right?
scholarship money for our police chief who passed away a few years ago of ALS. So that's a big community event that's going to be happening down at Onyx this year on 102. We will have Founders Day again in
Sometime
September.
in September, yeah.
And in the summer, we have something really cool coming to the town that we've never had before, which is the Smithsonian Museum. They're going to be doing an exhibit in June and July. The Outlet Village has given us a storefront. It was a vacant storefront that they've donated for that exhibit, and we encourage everyone to check that out. And I believe it's coming in mid-June, and we'll be there into July. So.
And for me, some committee vacancies. The historical committee always are asking us for helpers, and we just started to appoint some people to the Parks and Rec committee.
Yep.
What other committee positions are available at this point? Do you know of?
Yeah, so Affordable Housing Trust.
Yep.
We've started to take applications for that. That's a new committee. As you mentioned, Parks and Rec is new. We are in desperate need of a couple people for the Cable Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
That's probably our biggest need. That committee has two representatives from each of the 5 towns in the 5-town cable district, which is Lee, Lenox, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, Sheffield, and we have nobody on it right now. So we need representation. Everybody, there's a lot of people that don't like their options for cable and internet, and this is an opportunity to help
There's
fix
nobody
that.
on that board to advocate for those people.
Correct.
So,
Lee has no representation.
Right.
So, as you said, Historical Commission has got some open spots. Those are probably the biggest ones right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have a full, planning board, ZBA, housing authority, Greener Gateway. I know will always take more people. They have a good group. Ag Commission is full now. The Appalachian Trail Committee is always welcomes new people on there. Cultural Council, I believe the same thing. But they all have a good core group at the moment. But like I say, are always welcoming more.
Right.
So some of our committees cap at a certain number. Youth Commission, same thing. They have a good core group, but I think they have not an unlimited amount of spaces,
Yeah.
but I think they can take 15 or 20 people, where some are capped at 5. And so, a lot of opportunities for those. Email me,
if
call.
anybody, if anybody is interested, let us look on town website, come down to town hall, let us know you're interested. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I just wanted to say thank you, and excited to be your first guest, and good luck on the next podcast. Sean,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thanks for coming, Chris. And I think this will hopefully be very informative and helpful for people. And stay tuned for the next one.